Here we have a pretty straightforward DS prompt. It starts us off with a couple of variables. X and Y are integers. Let's get that down. And the question asks, is X greater than Y? So we have a yes-no question. That's going to mean a slightly higher level of attention to detail. But this question is absolutely screaming test it. We've got two variables. It's a couple of unknowns, and we don't know which one is bigger, or if technically they might even be equal to one another. We just know that we can't use fractions or decimals. So let's get down to the facts, see what we're dealing with. Fact 1 says x plus y is greater than 0. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come up with a real straightforward test case and plug in some numbers. So let's say x is 2, y is 1. 2 plus 1 is greater than 0. The question would then ask, is 2 greater than 1? And you can see it's pretty obvious the answer is yes. So I'll put a little yes there. But now here's something from my bag of tricks. When I find that I'm adding two things together, it doesn't really matter which one's which, right? So couldn't the x be the 1 and the y equal 2? 1 plus 2 is still greater than 0, but then the question becomes, is 1 greater than 2? And the answer there is clearly no. So with pretty quick work and a little bit of test it, we can prove that fact 1 is insufficient. That'll knock out A and D, and now we're moving on to fact 2. Here we're dealing with something a little bit more complex, but it's still based on math rules that I'm pretty sure you know. Y to the x power is less than 0. That means this number is negative. So let's talk about what it takes for that to happen. Y can't be positive. If you put any positive base down here, 2 to any power, you would end up with a positive. Even if the power was negative, the result would still be positive. By definition, that means that the y must be negative for the result to be negative. Furthermore, there's something you can deduce about the x, because if you have, say, -1 there and then you square it, it becomes positive. So x couldn't be positive 2. By definition, x must be odd. So we can actually deduce a couple of rules based on how math works. And now we can use these to test it. Let's say y equaled -1. That's a nice easy value. And you could have x equal +1. -1 to the first power is -1. That's less than 0, so that fits. In this particular example, is x greater than y? Absolutely it is. But nothing here said that the x had to be positive. We just know that it has to be odd. So if we keep that y as -1 and make the x -3, what we would have is -1 to the -3 power. That's equal to 1 over -1 cubed, and that is negative still. In this case, is x greater than y? Is -3 greater than -1? No, it's not. -1 is greater because it's farther to the right on a number line. So fact 2 has two different answers, and it also is insufficient, so knock out B. Here we have to combine, but we've got a bunch of great number property rules that we can rely on. We know that the y has to be negative and the x has to be odd, so we'll talk about this and how it interacts with this. For these two values to be greater than 0, it can't be two negatives. You can't have a negative x and a negative y. It doesn't work. You wouldn't get something greater than 0. You know the y has to be negative. And for this whole thing here to be greater than 0, the x would have to be positive and more than offset the y. With these two number property rules, you are done. Answer the question, is x greater than y? Always it is. Always yes. And the reason why is because the y has to be negative and the x would have to be positive. That makes it sufficient in the end, and you're picking C. While this question had a lot of little steps to it, it was perfect for test it. It was based on some basic algebra and exponent rules, and in the end there's a gigantic shortcut as long as you're taking really good notes. This is a question that counts. You got to be able to get it on the pad and do the work quickly and correctly. And realize what's not possible when you have an individual rule or some overlapping rules. All said, this is a great test of a lot of different skills, and that's why it helps you on that way to that 700 plus. If you're good at all these different things, you'll end up with that big score.